Good evening to everyone, and as the course is on advanced topic application of remote sensing and GIS for natural resources, I will be delivering my lecture on ecosystem services and REDD+. So if we look into the history, the topic what we are dealing today is from the time of Upanishads, and displayed on the monitor is one of the Shanti mantra, which says there should be, may there be peace in the sky, in the earth, in water, in plants, in trees, and in gods, in the various worlds. May there be peace, peace in all, peace needed within peace, peace which grows within me, peace, peace, peace. So here, what I want to highlight is that if the nature is given a due regard, survival of mankind is possible. Now this is the very basic history which comes from the Upanishad, and over the period of time people realized the importance of natural resources and the term environmental services has emerged. This was introduced in 1970 and it was a result of the report on the study of critical environmental problem, SCEP as it was called in 1970, and it listed the services including insect pollination, fisheries, climate regulation and flood control. This particular report, it focused on those environmental problems whose cumulative effects on ecological system are so large and prevalent that they have worldwide significance. Now, after that, in the following years, variation of the term were used, but eventually over the period of time, the term ecosystem services became the standard in scientific literature. Now, coming to the two reference documents, we'll be discussing two reference documents which further laid the basis of the consensus of the scientists worldwide. One is the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment 2005. It was actually called by the UN Secretary General Kofi Annan in 2000 and later initiated in 2001. It was called to assess the consequences of ecosystem changes for human well-being and the scientific basis for action needed to enhance the conservation and sustainable use of the system and their contribution to human well-being. It involved the work of more than 1,360 experts worldwide, and they were at the common consensus, and the output was the 5 technical volumes and 6 synthesis report, and they provided state-of-art scientific appraisal of the condition and trends in the world's ecosystem and services they provide, such as clean water, food, forest products, flood control, etc. And the options to restore, conserve and enhance the sustainable use of ecosystem. So that's where they laid the foundation of further studies in this field. Another document which came later was the Economics of Ecosystem and Biodiversity, known popularly by the name of TEEB, and it was an international initiative again to draw attention of global economic benefits of biodiversity, right? So the TEEB study was launched actually by Germany and the European Commission in response to a proposal by the G8+5 Environment Minister in Potsdam, Germany in 2007. And it was basically there to highlight the growing cost of biodiversity loss and ecosystem degradation. As all are aware that we are rampantly destructing the forest and biodiversity is losing at a rapid rate. Now, it was the result of the TEEB report was that to draw the experiences from the fields of science, economics and policy to enable practical actions. Now, what happened? These two efforts internationally which took place, they made people to realize all over the world that there is a societal dependence on the natural ecosystem and that there are explicit linkages in ecological structure and function with cultural values and benefits. These were the major two outcomes which made people and the various nations to come together and realize the importance of ecosystems. Now, with a brief history and introduction on the importance of ecosystem, how the services came, the concept of services came into being. Let us brush up the concept, what is an ecosystem, and we'll touch upon the structure and function of the same. Now, as we all know, and we must have studied during our, basics 10th and 10 plus 2, the most basic level, ecosystem is the most basic level as a natural unit of living things, which can be animal, plants, and microorganisms, and their physical environment. So these put together, it constitutes an ecosystem. There are again biotic component as well as abiotic component in an ecosystem, which yes, we all know. And then there are the various levels in the trophic structure, which starts from the autotrophs to heterotrophs. Among the autotrophs, yes, there are the plants, and then there are the various level of heterotrophs. So this constitutes the basic primary structure as well as the function of the ecosystem. The structure is this organization, and the function is again the transfer of energy and material. So continuing it further, the living and non-living element, they function together as an independent system. Like for example, if one part is damaged, it can have an impact on the whole system. So the various kind of the ecosystem what we have, it may be a terrestrial or marine, it can be inland or coastal, it can be rural or urban, global or local, depending upon the scale here. And at the continental level, if we see, we have various kind of ecosystem that includes rainforests, deserts, coral reef, and if we go close to our houses, we can see many other things in an urban environment. We'll be depicting this with the help of some pictures now. So this slide, it shows the various major ecosystem there in the at a global scale, at a landscape level. And there are the freshwater ecosystems are there. There are deserts, there are temperate forests, there are tropical forests, there are rocky intertidal coasts are there, and so on. But what we are doing, we are trying to change the very natural component of the ecosystem through the various activities like urban sprawl is there, mining and industry is there, cut of forest, felling of trees, and so on. So if we come to an immediate landscape which we see in our surrounding in a day-to-day life, we can have a woodland forest, we can have a farmland, we can have the coast, and we can have the various things in our immediate landscape in our day-to-day life. We can also do some kind of ecological restoration and the various kind of things. So coming to it, the ecosystem which are there at a various scale, from continental, global to the local scales, as well as in the various regions. Each ecosystem, they provide us one kind of the service or the other. Now coming to the very definition of the ecosystem services, they are defined as the services provided by the natural environment and that benefit the people. Ecosystem services, as per the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment that I mentioned previously, they are classified into 4 types, which are the provisioning services, regulating services, and the cultural services. Underlying all these services are there the supporting services. Coming to the provisioning services, these are the direct services, for example, the food, fresh water, fuel wood, fiber, biochemical, and genetic resources. Coming to the regulating services, we have climate regulation, disease regulation, water purification, pollination, etc. And cultural services include spiritual and religious, recreation, ecotourism, aesthetic, inspirational, educational, sense of place, cultural heritage. Now underlying all these 3 major services are the supporting services, which could be nutrient cycling, and there is some kind of evolution, soil formation, spatial structure, and the primary production. Now given here are some pictorial representation of the various kind of the services which are mentioned here. Now again, the ecosystem services, all which I mentioned in my previous slide, they are directly related to human well-being. Some are related in a major way and the others are related in a minor way, but yes, they are related to the well-being of the human as such, whether it is a security, whether it is a basic material for the good life, whether it is health, and whether it is a good social relations. Now here I would like to present you some example of the landscapes where the various ecosystem they interact and have impact on the other ecosystem, and that is what we try to present here, the interdependence of the ecosystem. For example, this particular example is a small mountain landscape. Here we have a upstream, here some mountains are there, and then there is a community in the downstream. So what happens, whatever the activities are there done there in the upstream, they regulate the processes downstream, and then if the activities in the upstream includes the conservation of forests and protecting them against any loss, then downstream there will be the watershed services will be delivered to the people, and then people are benefited from that, and then these services can be paid to the people upstream, which may not be earning so well and whose quality of life may not be as good as the people living in the downstream here. So this is one example of a mountain landscape where any activities on protecting the landscape in the upstream will have the direct beneficial role on the community downstream. There is another example of a coastal landscape here, where what happens, there are the components are there. For example, there are the mangrove forest here, there are the sea grasses here, there are coral reefs, and then there are some coastal recruitments keep happening over here in this region. So what happens, the management practices which are done in the area, in the entire, in all the ecosystem, whether they are the mangrove or they are the sea grasses or they are the coral ecosystem, these management practices, they reduce the nutrient runoff, they reduce the sediment runoff, and they enforce, we can have enforce such events in some areas, and all these management practices, they will, render a good ecosystem altogether, the holistic development of the region. And if these management practices are not followed, the climate change impacts will be evident, such as there can be a sea level rise, and there can be some ocean acidification, and there is, the ocean warming can also take place. So one example we touched upon was the mountain ecosystem, and now the coastal landscapes. So how the ecosystems are related and how the management practices they help in the overall impact, they have impact on the entire processes. So there is one more example of the agriculture landscape. Like in agriculture landscape, we have agro-ecosystem. They provide us provisioning services, direct one, which consists of food, fiber, bioenergy, and they also, the various activities which we perform here, like there is a tillage, crop diversity, depending upon field size and crop rotation, and cover cropping and all. And these services and management practices, they put together, they give a lot of provisioning services in if we talk about the agriculture landscape. Now it becomes very important to actually value the ecosystem services, because until something is having a direct value related to it, it is taken for granted. Right, so it becomes very important to give a value to our ecosystem services, then only the cost of its loss can be worked out, and realizing the massive loss in terms of cost, the nations will be more, and they will respect the nature more, and efforts will be more toward protection of the various ecosystem. Now coming to the valuing of the ecosystem services, there can be a use value and there can be non-use value. Use value, they can be direct use value, indirect use value, and option value. Similarly, in non-use values, we can have option value, legacy value, and intrinsic value. So what happens, option value is a common in between the two use value and the non-use value. And direct use value, as the name itself suggests, that ecosystem services which comes from the ecosystem is a direct use, it can earn you money. It is a direct market value resulting from direct usability of the environment product such as the raw material and food. Indirect use value, if we see, these are the value derived from the direct ecosystem services such as environment, self-regulation and food and flood control. Now, option values are the future values derived from a complete healthy environment, right, such as genetic resources. Coming to legacy and intrinsic value, value of leaving the environment for the rest of the humanity and future generation is known as legacy value, and intrinsic value is which tells you, like, which gives you a satisfaction just for the ecosystem being there. So it is basically a satisfaction value derived from the existence of nature. Now here, if you see on a lighter side, there is one cartoon shown where there are animals and there is a global consultant who is saying that whichever is not having a value, we should, you know, lay them off, those species. Now here there are microbes which are generally found no value, but yes, they play a very important role in decomposing the excreta and keeping our world safe and disease free. So we should not take the small things for granted and keep the things because they are big. Every component in the ecosystem delivers some sort of the other. Only thing we need to put them into a right way. So like we were talking about the valuing of ecosystem service. There are the two mechanisms. One is the total economic value framework, which we discussed just now, and then within this there is an approach which is called as impact pathway approach. This approach, what happens in this, suppose how do we find that yes, a particular ecosystem service is having some value to it. So in that case, there is some policy changes brought into the system. The impact of that policy change on the ecosystem are studied, change in ecosystem services mapped, and how it affects the human welfare, that also is worked out, and based upon that the economic value of changes in the ecosystem services assessed. So the primary step in this pathway, it becomes that to establish the environmental baseline, right? And then once the baseline is established, we can identify and provide the qualitative assessment of the potential impact of policy options on ecosystem services. Once the qualitative assessments are made, can quantify the impact of policy options and then assess the effect of human welfare and value the changes in ecosystem services. Similarly, once that exercise is done, as we discussed earlier, we categorize the services into the various heads and then give a score to them, right, based upon, like, when there was a baseline means we were doing nothing, and when there is a policy driven change was there, so there can be a policy option 1, there can be a policy option 2 and policy option 3 and so on. So now here we have to give the appropriate scores depending upon the baseline and what are the policy options. Score can be like potential significant positive effect, it can be potential positive effect alone, there could be negligible effect, potential negative effect, potential significant negative, like it's a scale that varies. We can also quantify in terms of number also these scores. Now coming to like we now have understood like what are the ecosystem, what are the services they provide, how to value those ecosystem services. Now the question comes how to make payment in terms of when we know yes these are the ecosystem which provide us the services, how to make the payment. So there are the various procedures those exist for the payment of ecosystem services. For example, there is a procedure called public payment. What happens in this, the federal, state or the local government agencies, they provide money to the land owners to implement various restoration activities, for example, afforestation, reforestation, management project on their forest land for the purpose of producing or enhancing the ecosystem services. So this comes in the form of funding to restore the ecosystem. There can be voluntary transactions for which comes through the sale of forest carbon offset credits in the voluntary carbon market, which is called VCL. There can be a purchase of hunting leases by private individual and entrance fee for wildlife viewing and hunting, and the purchase of conservation easement by NGOs. So there are many ways which can be worked, and it varies from region to region, country to country, and even the state to state, right? So there is another method of payment of ecosystem service which can be which is compliance driven transaction. In this, what happens, there are the markets and payment mechanism are developed in response to government regulation, such as water quality trading, wetland or stream mitigation banking, conservation banking, and carbon offset market under the regional cap and trade programs. Right. So in US, these are there in place for since long, and there are the various mechanisms which exist there. So for the we don't have sufficient time to go into the details of everything. So I have provided here the brief description with a web link for the further reading of the participants. If we come to like how remote sensing and GIS play its role in assessing the ecosystem services. So once the remote sensing data is there, we can get the baseline from there as well as the changes that are happening in case of a policy options, various policy options. Those are policy 1, 2, 3, whatever. So the baselines and the changes in the ecosystem, they can come from the remote sensing information, remote sensing data through their classification and the time series classification, as some pictures are here. Once those baseline and time series data, or the in terms of the various, in case of various policy options are there, is available with us, we can input that information in the geographic information system, GIS, and there are various models available. This is a review work by Nemec and Haim in 2012, which gives the list of the various models, what are those type of the model, and whether it is a open access or a paid kind of a project, and also at what scale it operates. It is at a landscape level or it is a very site specific level. It also gives you the time requirement in terms of processing of the data, and then whether the stakeholder involvement is required or not. So there are methods available using remote sensing and GIS wherein you can assess the ecosystem services and develop the further processes and the policies accordingly. Now this is one example where the watershed protection and forest was implemented in US. So what happened in 1997, there was in New York City, they made a very decisive move to invest in the ecosystem services of forests. Because the forests are the natural water purifier. So what the government in New York they did, they invested in the people to protect and start the forest, so that the downstream people get the purified water. So that what happened, the cost of the otherwise that could incur on the processing of the water was overcome. Similarly, there is one program which is called Grain for Green program in China. In this particular program, with the help of the satellite data, it was assessed that like what are the areas which earlier cropland and later they were converted into the various other ecosystem like forest, grassland, water area, and so on. So based upon these intensity of the changes which took place in various provinces, the population, the local communities, they were compensated in terms of the grain subsidy, right, and also there was a direct cash subsidy also which was given. So this program was found very encouraging for the people, and a lot of community they came forward for the program which is called Grain for Green happened. With this program, the communities which were practicing the agriculture in the upstream and cutting lot of forest, now the government started giving subsidy on the grain, and also started providing them the grain. So what happened? Now they stopped felling the trees because the grain is coming from the government, and instead, in spite of that, on top of it, they were also given compensation on the other things. So it was having a dual advantage of now the downstream, there was a fertility of the land was more, soil erosion was less, and floods and other hazards were also decreased. So this was a very successful program which was which happened in China, and it was initiated by FAO. Now coming to why we are talking about ecosystem services now. What is making us to talk about this very topic, which was, yes, it was there always, but never given its due credit, because there are the climate changes happening, which everybody knows, right? So there are extreme events that are happening. For example, in India alone, in last 2 years, there have been several hazards which have taken place, be it the Kedarnath flood which happened in 16 June 2013, be it the flood which hit the Jammu and Kashmir and parts of Punjab in India and Pakistan last year itself, be it a Hudhud cyclone which occurred in the coastal Andhra and Odisha, and again the severe rain which took place in Uttarkashi in last year. So the overall, the concept here is the services offered by the ecosystem, by the environment, they are taken for granted, and the cost paid later is very high. And this is the cost. This particular slide shows you the cost that what we pay in terms of loss of life and property. Now coming to, there have been a lot of debate, what is climate change, why it is happening. So if we come like climate change is the average weather at a given point and time of year over a long period, typically 30 years. So if something is constant for a 30-year, yes, it's a climate which is a constant, and something extreme which happens is known as a climate change. So we expect the weather to change a lot from day to day, but we expect the climate relatively constant. If it is not happening, then yes, we can say it is a climate change. And yes, one thing, we should not confuse the weather change to the climate change. Weather is that something which changes from even daily, it may change from day to day, but climate change remains constant for a longer duration. So if the climate doesn't remain constant, we call it as a climate change. And the key question is, what is a significant change? And it depends upon the underlying level of climate variability, or like what are the extreme events that are taking place, how it was earlier, say for example, one generation back, or something which we get to know from our elders and all like that. Now it becomes crucial to understand the difference between the climate change and climate variability. Climate variability, small phenomena, and the change is a massive phenomena, right? And over the history of planet, climate has changed, yes, naturally, as it must have happened during the ice age, and also when the dinosaurs, they disappeared. So what is why it is happening? All of us knows there have been human activities which have warmed the climate, and human activities, there are many, as all of us are aware of it. So one such activity is the deforestation, like we are felling our forest. Coming to the definition which FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, has given, deforestation is the permanent destruction of forests in order to make land available for other use. So basically we are changing a land cover to a land use, primarily agriculture and then habitation. An estimated 18 million acres of forests, roughly the size of Panama, are lost each year, according to the UN Nation Agriculture Organization. There are some other statistics which I have presented here. About half of the world's tropical forests have been cleared so far, and we are left only with the half of it. So just imagine, already we have lost a significant quantity of our forest, area under our forest. So forests currently, they cover 30% of the world's landmass as per National Geographic, and the forest loss contributes between 12 and and 17% of the annual global greenhouse gas emission as per the WRI, World Resource Institute. So now coming to the deforestation, it is considered to be one of the contributing factors to global climate change. Trees absorb greenhouse gases and help in reducing carbon emissions, and they produce oxygen and perpetuate the water cycle by releasing water vapor. So if there are no forests, the lands can quickly become barren. Coming to another serious process which is happening as due to human intervention is the forest degradation. Here the very property of the forest is not changed. The forest remains forest, but what happens, it is degraded to the extent that its ability to provide you the services is reduced. So these are the two things which are we should seriously understand: deforestation and the forest degradation. So why? Because forests have an important role in mitigating the climate change, right? So forests are causes of climate change through its deforestation, and they are the sources of mitigation as they are the sink of greenhouse gases. Forest destruction and land use change account for 24% of the GHG emission and loss of biodiversity. They are the natural store of carbon dioxide. And whatever activity, suppose we want to reduce the deforestation, the activities are very cost effective ways for, there are very if we reduce the deforestation, we can very effectively reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, and that is why there is a lot of focus on preventing the forest loss nowadays. Now coming to the brief history of climate change, actually the climate change in the past, as I told that during the ice age there was a massive climate change that took place. Then when the dinosaurs, they disappeared, that time there was a climate change, but that time the human population was not so spread across the globe, and that cost in terms of loss in terms of the life and property was also not much. But as the development happened in the Western countries, and people realized that because of the human interference with the nature, that things are going in a wrong direction, it raised the eyebrows of the people, and then various talks and treaties came into place on the climate change. So for example, it started in 1992 with a framework convention on climate change, and further there was a Kyoto Protocol, there was a Marrakesh Accords, there was and then in 2005 the Kyoto Protocol it entered in. There was a Bali roadmap, there was COP15 in Copenhagen, and so on, in Cancun, which took place in 2010, and recently also there was some decision was made in Durban platform where the people talked about the green climate fund and the long-term finance, the Warsaw framework of REDD plus, and internal mechanism for loss and damage. So here the important thing becomes the REDD plus, which we will be taking up in next of my slides. So this is with the small background. I wanted to come to my next topic of my lecture, which is the REDD plus. So it's a basic background of it is the climate change, and yes, we should do something to protect our earth from the changing climate, which is there because of the human activities only. So this is just a small this thing which tells you that the United Nations Framework for Climate Change Convention, it clustered the various countries in the world into 3 groups. They are the Annex1, Annex2 and the non-Annex1 countries. Annex1 countries are basically the industrialized countries and economies in transition. Then there are the industrialized countries, and then there are the developing countries. So there are the different mechanisms which state like how the country should cooperate together so that the climate change mitigation can take place and without hampering the development of any country. So this slide is there which tells you a brief account of the Kyoto Protocol, which was adopted in 1997 in UNFCCC Conference of Parties 3, COP3 in Kyoto, Japan in 1997. Yes, it is repeated again anyway. It defines the target for GHG emission reduction for the period between 2008 to 2020. 12 to 5.2% compared to what were the levels they were there in 1990. And there was attempt was there to develop international market-based mechanism to meet that target, and at that time there was 184 signatory states to this protocol. Later there was a Bali roadmap, and there was in this Bali roadmap there was a breakthrough in the mindset of the people. They shared the understanding for the necessity of common efforts both by the developed and developing countries. And climate change was linked to the economic growth and sustainable development. And most important is that action fall across a variety of economic sectors. And then again the deadline was put, because unless until you put a deadline to anything, hardly anything is achieved. So there was a deadline put to it for 2012. Now coming to the topic reducing deforestation and degradation, it is like we have 70% of the emission, greenhouse gas emission, which come from the forestry, deforestation, degradation, and rest of the emission comes from the fossil fuel burning. So what is happening here, though this particular section is very small in terms of the emission which is happening, but it is having a regulatory effect on the many things, and that's why it becomes the focus for conservation and focus for action. So what happened during the previous global approaches to curb the deforestation, they were found to be unsuccessful. People could not achieve much of it, and then this was a new proposal reducing emission from deforestation and forest degradation to provide a new framework. So what happened here, the developing countries are willing and able to reduce their deforestation rate. They were kept to a reference time period, and with a lucrative that they will receive financial compensation. Now the developing countries will be paid by whom? By the developed countries who have already exceeded their emission targets. Now again, it has a potential to deliver co-benefits. For example, if you protect a forest, there can be poverty alleviation in forest area, there will be biodiversity conservation, and so on. Now coming again to some of the components of it. So when a REDD is to be brought into place, there was a term called PES, Payment of Ecosystem Services, which was introduced. So with this Payment of Ecosystem Services, they were attached to the reducing emission from deforestation and degradation, so that the communities, they can benefit from the program, and the direct benefit may go to the communities. But there have been many earlier efforts to protect the tropical forest, which could not see the much progress. So these initiatives differ from REDD in terms of protecting the forest resource and sharing the revenue. In other previous steps which were taken by the various countries or governments, the payment was not there to the communities, and also there was no sharing of the revenue. So with this aim, the REDD framework was constituted by involving the community, so that the direct benefit can be transferred to them as well. But again, nothing is free from problem, as we see here also. In REDD, there are certain problems, for example, leakage, additionality, permanence, and measurement. Leakage is like, if suppose somebody is protecting, a country is protecting a forest somewhere, and equal amount of forest is lost somewhere else, it becomes a leakage. Then they cannot claim that overall they are protecting a forest. So coming to that basic definition, it says, avoiding deforestation in one place may make it more likely that another unprotected forest will be destroyed instead in another area or another country. So what happens, some of the country, they will use the timber, they will fulfill their timber requirement by importing the wood from the other countries, and they will be protecting their forests. So these kind of leakages, if they are there, then we cannot claim that they are complying to it. Again, additionality is a bigger problem. Again, emission saving must be measured against a guess about what have happened otherwise and are impossible to prove. So how much additional I have grown during my REDD compliance, measuring it is difficult, but it is not impossible. For that I should be technically skilled in using my remote sensing data and in terms of the manpower, skilled manpower. So those countries which do not have this, they may face a problem of measurement and additionality. Again, there is a term called permanence, which says that forest carbon is not permanently locked anyway. Right. So if you are saying that I am locking a carbon by protecting my forest, it may not be the case, because when it is burnt as a fuel, when a tree dies, it may become a fossil fuel in future, and this makes it fundamentally different to, for carbon. So none of these problems were solved, and we came with another term which says REDD+. REDD became REDD+, and the plus stands for conservation, sustainable management of forests, enhancement of forest carbon stock. And this very terminology, the Indian counterpart, they spearheaded the concept of REDD+, because they found there were the problems in the REDD, and even that you are not destroying your forest and protecting it, you were not given a due regard in the international community. So then came the concept of the REDD+. These are the some studies where I tried to show, with the help of remote sensing data, how can we say like my forest or my vegetation, there is a plus component in it. So this is an enhanced vegetation index map taken from the Moody's data of September 2009 in Madhya Pradesh. And if I see a similar image of 2014, you can see how the vegetation values are changing in terms of the shades of the gray. This is a panchromatic data, gray levels it is showing. So definitely there is some places there is the decrease in the gray value, some places there is increase, and that is how we prepare the change value, and we can find wherever there is additionality or some improvement is there, and so on. These things can further be overlaid with the forest bound, and we can work out wherein the forest changes have taken place. Similarly, this is one slide that shows change in Idukki district of Kerala, where the forest over the time they have been converted into the grassland, as if for example, if you see here, this is a Landsat MSS multispectral image of January 1983. Here if you see a vast tract. Similarly, this is one example which I have taken from the internet here, and this shows you how the deforestation has occurred in Amazon especially. So this is actually known as the fishbone pattern of deforestation, where they will just clear the forest like anything, and a lot of smuggling of timber will take place. So here if you see, over a period of time, these are the things which shows you how the vast tracts of forests have been lost since 2002 2008. So this is because of the human activities. We are witnessing a loss of forests, and this is inviting the climate change. So there is some technical problem with my session, but we will continue the discussion, and there is nothing much, but I have one more slide to show you where the mangrove in Bhitarkanika, they have changed over a period of from the applied date. So as for now, we discussed upon like what are the ecosystem services, how we started thinking about the ecosystem services, though during the since Upanishads they were there in place, and over the years, due to the hazards those are taking place, the loss of life and property that is happening, and the diseases they are coming, and so many problems, environment problems that are happening, that people came together and started talking of the ecosystem services, and gave it a more scientific look. And a debate is now worldwide. People are aware of the the services the ecosystem provide, and they are working toward it. Reducing emission from deforestation and degradation is one such effort to curb the changes in the ecosystem, so that the generations can benefit from it and we all can enjoy the various ecosystem services, whether there are provisioning, regulating or cultural. And supporting services are the services which are there in our day-to-day daily life. So this topic is very, very important, and we should pay a lot of attention to it. And I will conclude my lecture with that. With the help of geospatial technologies, we can do a lot. We can do various kind of analysis. We can qualify as well as quantify the natural resources. And once these are proper scientific investigations are there, we can make the suitable policies, and we can convince the decision maker as well as the communities to come forward and contribute their stake in that, and so that the process go unhampered and our generations can also enjoy the benefits of the nature that we are enjoying. Yeah, thank you very much.